Boom! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakian. Pumped to be talking about the future of comedy, positive comedy, content creation, self-actualization. We have Joey Avery joining us on the show.
What's up? How are we?
I love it.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute.
It's good to see you again.
Yes, huge thank you for coming on to the show. Super pumped. We have a lot to talk about.
Of course.
For those that don't know, Joey Avery's been a comedian now for 6 years. Mm-hmm. He's also doing content production with Chubbies. He also has his 2 podcasts, one with Chubbies, one called Pier 69. His list of events is just pop that he's going and doing comedy at. He's got some acting under his belt. He's got all this cool stuff. We're going to talk about this.
Triple threat. No.
Quintuple threat.
Yeah. I don't know anything above triple, so I just leave it there. I have many skills. I can cook a little bit, you know.
Ladies, yeah. I can cook. Joey, okay, we love starting off the show with a big history perspective on things. All right, so after a long period of evolution, humans find themselves as stewards of Earth. We're hockey sticking up in population, exponential technology. What is the current synthesis on the state of humanity?
The current synthesis on the state of, well, I'm glad you started off with such an easy question, which obviously I've prepared for. I think, on the spot, I think that humanity right now is at a point where we feel, because we're seeing so much content all the time, like things are at a boiling point and like we're about to blow, and maybe we are, or maybe statistically it's actually a very good time to be alive, but because we're drowning in stuff all the time, we just think everything's about to go bad. I don't know the answer, but I feel like everyone is freaking out a lot right now, and I think that if you look back at history, that was always the case, and we've always been freaking out, and maybe it'll be okay. That's what I think.
There's a very strange thing when you think about the biological creature, like the primate, not like, oh, I'm human, I'm advanced, but the primate level, we are totally anxious creatures. Like the fact that we're just abiding by social regulations right now, where neither one of us is taking this hot tea and pouring it on the other one because
I beat the living crap out of you, to be quite honest.
See, you're walking down the street.
I'm a formidable foe. You wouldn't want to try that with me.
No one just takes their car and starts driving it on the sidewalk.
Right. Couple people here and there, and that's always scary. Sometimes old people will make that move.
Do you think that we are way overloaded in content then because of the exponentials, the social media, the instantness of all of the pocket computing? Do you think that's a big part of it?
I think it is. I mean, I don't remember who did it. Maybe you would know, but I remember watching a TED Talk a while ago, and they were just talking about basically the dissemination of information and how people feel like, if you do surveys, people feel like it's the worst time to be alive. But if you look at statistics in terms of safety, well-being, all the things that people have at their disposal, it's by far the best time to be alive. People don't feel that way because when you go online, you have access to everything that happens, and horrible, horrible things happen every day, have happened every day, will happen every day. But I feel like in my own life, I'll sit there and think, well, I should be informed about what's going on. I should go on my phone and go through and look for stuff, or if I'm writing jokes, see what's going on. And after 30 minutes for that, I want to drive my car onto the sidewalk because I start freaking out. And then you slow down and you think, is my life in a good spot? Are there people that I love in my life? Do I have the ability personally in my current situation to chase a dream and do what I want to do, even if that gets stressful sometimes? That's an amazing thing, and you shouldn't take that for granted. Otherwise, this is going to fly right by you, and it's going to be over, and you'll miss the whole point.
Oh, that's such a good entry into the self-actualization conversation. Just in a moment to back up there, this is extremely important, this notion that we live in the best times in terms of ubiquity in water, shelter, food, internet, education, healthcare. Everything is already here, made by 100 billion people before us. And so to have gratitude for that And to realize that we now have all of these tools for us to be able to find what we care about, what brings us the most meaning, and pursue that is so crucial. Better Angels of Our Nature, Steven Pinker, The Argument. There's been many talks now about this is the best time to be alive. The penicillin, antibiotics. There's so many
thin condoms. The pill, no condoms. Listen, that's not what we're getting into. I think that what people are reacting to a little bit is when computers started to come out and the internet came online. People were so excited, and especially in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, where we are and where I grew up, there was this prognostication about how this is going to be the best thing ever. And then what people are realizing is it's kind of sowed worse divisions. It seems to have made politics worse. And so people are going, oh, maybe this is actually the worst thing because we're thinking about it all the time. But I think that if you can it's a pendulum that's swinging back and forth, but if you can take a second and just think about the bigger picture instead of the immediate moment, and at least take a personal perspective of realizing you can't control everything and thinking everything is a positive and a negative, but taking a position of gratitude towards some of the opportunities that you do have, you'll live a much better life just by putting your focus on that and understanding that there are still massive problems. It doesn't mean, oh, the internet saved everything. Now there's no poor people in the world or this country, but position of gratitude for where you're at and try and use that to help make things better instead of freaking out all the time.
Yep. The ways that we can still unleash the next iterations of the internet and exponential technology to maximize imagination and creativity, which was one of the things that we came to the social media generation with, that this internet is going to enable us to the greatest flourishing of imagination and creativity.
Right.
Okay, this is interesting because when I watched your commencement speech, 2013, UC San Diego.
Had the flow going on, beautiful hair.
The flow was happening then.
It was preening.
And everyone's got to watch that. I'm telling you, it's one of my favorite. I'm serious. It's one of my favorites because for commencement talk, because I think you actually hit on one of the most important things, which is this idea of self-actualization. You're like engineers. You guys already know what you're going to be doing for the next couple of years.
Being rich.
I already got like 6 jobs lined up, offers. And then a bunch of other, like a majority of people are still figuring themselves out when they're leaving school or when they're leaving high school or when they're in the mid-20s, whatnot. So I want you to teach us about, you had this interesting study abroad in South Africa as well.
Yep.
And I want you to kind of tell us about that and about how you ended up giving that commencement speech, why self-actualization is so important.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate enough to have the experience to live in Cape Town, South Africa for 6 months at the end of my time in college. And that was just one of those moments where, I kind of picked a place where I was like, I don't know anyone, I think, who's been there, maybe 1 or 2 people. It's the opposite side of the world. If I can get out there, my thought, obviously there are many reasons I chose it. I was always very interested in Mandela and read a lot of books on him and thought, it was an interesting historical place because it was, dealing with apartheid ending not too long ago. And I felt like living in the United States, it would be kind of helpful to go somewhere where it was almost like segregation just ended and just have that feeling kind of more intensely, which was intense. But when I went over there, one of my main goals was, hey, I'm getting off an airplane, some metal tube on the other side of the world, about as far away as I can possibly go. Why don't I use this moment to try everything I've never tried or to reinvent myself? No one here knows me. I wasn't running from everything, but I think everyone wants a rebirth every once in a while. And when I was out there, they had a program where you could have a radio show. So I had a radio show at University of Cape Town. And then a friend of mine found an open mic for comedy and was like, you should try this out, because he'd heard me on the radio. And I was like, wow, I should try it out. And so I holed up my room and watched a bunch of specials and then, wrote, my 7 minutes and went up and did it and got off stage once. And I was like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. It was the mix of everything that I'd always wanted to do when I was a kid, but I never had put it quite all together. And then the second I did stand up, I was like, oh, it all fits. It's like it's almost like philosophy. You get paid to think. It's obviously not nearly as actually good because a lot of it's BS and false logic, but it's great and it's fun being funny and performing, all these things that I always like to do.
Yeah, there's a couple important things there. First is this apartheid. I want you to teach us about that, because then we'll get to kind of this comedy and why it's so meaningful to you and how we can get that to more people. But let's start with the apartheid. What's that actually like to go there in 2013, 2012?
Yeah, my experience with it obviously is not the experience that people who actually lived through it were. So I just kind of got to go there and just observe, where I saw the tensions, and kind of went to some different museums. There's like a District 6 museum where you get to go into one of the townships, which is basically, or go into one of the cities that was, for minority communities that they just had to uproot and leave. And they have all these different artifacts from that time, which is very interesting. And then, I got to teach in what they have townships out there. They're basically like different kind of ghettos. And so I got to go out there and teach and just see what life is like for a lot of the communities that have been, left behind by the progress that South Africa has, which is also the most well-off nation in Africa, but still has obviously quite a lot of problems. So it was interesting. I obviously didn't have an insane first-hand experience, but anytime you go somewhere for a brief time, I was there for 6 months, but by the time I left, I was like, oh, I think I'm just starting to understand this a little bit. You come away from that just with a broader perspective.
Is it a dichotomy of haves and have-nots that is greater than the United States is most? Like Rincon Hill and Bayview, right? Or Tenderloin and
right.
Hill, in SF.
It feels like it, more. It is more visually, because you can go to a certain area that's, 4 or 5 star resorts, and it's a beach town and everyone's having fun. And then on the way there, you're driving past and you're on the road and you can see an entire area where it's like, shacks just kind of hand built with, metal roofing and kind of like jimmy rigged, dishes and stuff like that. So it's a little more visual than some of the poverty that you see in the U.S., which is more like, high rises, but you can tell they're kind of beat down. And then maybe there's some super millionaires living in San Francisco, but they don't have the most ostentatious house outwardly. But I don't know, but I would assume statistically it's worse there.
I want to, at the very end, I want to circle back to wealth inequality and hear some of your thoughts on it. Let's talk about that feeling that you had when you're out there, you're performing, you have that moment for yourself when you're like, I love this feeling. Is that a combination of the audience and making them laugh and what you feel from being able to think creatively?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best feeling in the world, is to be up there saying stuff and it works, and you just, like, the first time you get that, you just feel that energy just moving through, and you're like, oh, I'm the man, and then you tell the next joke and it just eats a plate of it, and you're just like, okay, and then you start like talking a little bit faster, and then at the end you kind of get off, and at least the first time you kind of get off and you're like numb, you're like feeling kind of like crazy, and you're like, oh, I think that went well, and then one of your like 2 drunk friends comes up to you and is like, you were amazing, and you're like, maybe I am amazing. I was the dumbest, dude. I did one set, 7 minutes, and I was like, okay, I'll write some new material, I'll come back in 2 weeks. Come back in 2 weeks, do an entirely different 7 minutes. And I'm bringing like 15 to 20 students out, and like it's a big party. And like both of them objectively were like, for a first and second time, decent, but went okay and had major misses, but got through it and were like decent. And in my dumb head, I get off and I'm like, all right, so I have 14 minutes of my hour ready. I just got to get to 60 from here. I can get back stateside, start shopping it around to HBO. And then, you realize what actual comedy is like, and you realize it takes years to grind out like your first good 5 minutes, and then, build from there.
Okay, and as we get to that, let's talk about self-actualization. You know, when you come back and you're giving this commencement speech, you're all about really trying to get people's awareness expanded to the fact that they can be the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
And you kind of embody that now. You're becoming the best version of yourself. So teach us about that.
Well, I hope so. You know, I mean, I think for everyone, of course, that's a daily struggle. That's a process thing. Like, you never get to that point where you're like, I'm God now, so let's do this. Yeah, the way that I got to do the speech, it was just an open competition. Like, I had a friend of mine who's like, man, I can't believe you're the valedictorian of your college. I was like, yeah, I wasn't. That's not what that was. I did well. But yeah, it was a competition. I remember I was going somewhere and just like, I was like traveling somewhere, and I just sat down on the plane and was just like, I want to do this, and just wrote something and sent it in, and it got picked for a next round, and just kind of went through. I think at the time, what I was thinking about was, you know, when you're going to speak at an event, you're thinking, what's going on with me and how does it apply to everyone else? And like, because if you're not feeling it, then your speech is BS, you know, already. No one's going to care. So what I was thinking about at that time was like, I think I'm in a position where I'm lucky. I've found something that I really care about and like to do.
Yeah.
And I still feel like whatever success that I achieve in this, like, that alone is a gift that I know that a lot of people wish they had or are still searching for. And so that's what I just kind of wanted to write about, was like thinking of graduation as like, hey, don't use this moment to say, okay, well, I guess I have my fun in college, I'm just going to give up and do something that I don't want to do at all. Or to think like, oh, great, now everything's going to change now. It's like, this is just a ceremony. Like, your life is going to change, but you need to keep thinking with, you know, the advantage that you have right now is that you are idealistic. The world's going to beat that out of you, but try and not forget that you have things that excite you and they're worth doing no matter what, you know? And because the second you give up on that, you can just become a, you know, cynical, crabby, you know, person that you don't even like.
Damn, that is some wisdom right there. I love that right there.
Yeah.
So you're preaching right now, identify what brings you the most fulfillment in life and pursue that with the most vigor and intensity out of everything else, and never put those things on the back seat, because that's going to be the greatest regret you have in life,
right,
is not pursuing that. That's where people can become really resentful or upset.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of people are starting to realize that they would rather be poor. They would rather be living bare bones every single month, just getting by, but doing what they love as artists or entrepreneurs, rather than working for other people, doing things they don't like to do.
Right. But I think the important thing with that is also to be honest with yourself, because you might actually be that person that's like, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to struggle. I would rather have this job, which I kind of care about, but I know I can make a lot of money. And what I really care about is, you know, making that money, going to Hawaii, spending time with my friends and family. That can be your choice. That's fine. You don't have to like pigeonhole yourself into being that person who's like, oh, I think I wanted to write a book once, so now I'm going to stare at this blank page and I suck and I don't want to write this book. And then you write a horrible, crappy book and you're like, why did I divorce my wife to do this? Or husband.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. There's,
you know,
the different colors on the color wheel for people and what they want to explore in their life.
You have to be honest with yourself, and you got to make, whatever you decide to do, you're going to make some sacrifices. If it is, I want to chase this dream, you are going to sacrifice some free time, probably definitely going to sacrifice some money, and you're going to take a big risk.
Kids,
right?
Money. Yeah, totally.
And if you go the other way, you might be sacrificing a dream. So, you know, I don't have that answer, but you got to figure out what you really want. And then once you do, realize that you're taking a risk either way. But once you've taken that risk, just realize that's the life you chose. Like, really, no one chose that for you. So whatever drawbacks that has, don't spend your life being super upset about those things. You chose that life. You know, you eat the plate of shit you decided to serve. Can I say that?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
so what now is our current state of things? Like we're moving like 6 years, like you've been working in comedy, doing acting, doing content creation, and you're seeing kind of like there's a little bit of in some ways some sort of like negativity sometimes in comedy, and that can be funny. At the same time, you can definitely be what's called punching down at people. There's plenty of good material to punch up, like the amount of people that literally like extracted wealth like a syringe as shareholders from the masses. Like there's tons of fun to make fun of them for being the wealth inequality megalomaniacs sometimes. So how do you do this positive culture of comedy?
Well, it's funny. So like we were talking about it a little bit before this started, but I do think in comedy, which is kind of sometimes almost by necessity a little bit kind of a negative art form, because it's so funny to be negative. It's so like the guy, you walk outside and like there's one rain cloud over your head and then a semi drives by and it splashes you with water and then like someone breaks up with you and then someone kicks you in the balls. Like that's hilarious. That's so funny. And I think comedians are always thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And if you're just thinking all the time, you're gonna get negative. It's not like a meditative like yoga thing where you're like, oh my God, I like ascended to this higher plane of bliss. Like that's not what comedy is. So it's hard to make comedy positive. But the other important thing with comedy is you're supposed to find your own voice. Yeah. And I've never of course I'm like anyone else. I get sad, I get, depressed, I get negative all the time. And sometimes I'm funny when I am negative. But in general as a person, if I'm trying to think how I compare to most people, I don't consider myself that way. I consider myself a positive person, and I have to consider myself that way because otherwise I wouldn't be happy, So trying to make comedy positive, for me, it's trying to basically even if a joke is negative or a punchline is negative, bring it around at the end to I'm looking at it because you're examining something with a joke. I'm gonna examine this thing. I'm gonna look at it maybe in a very negative way and light it up and all that funny's in there. But really at the end, I can kind of pull it around to make a slightly broader point, which doesn't waste too much time not being funny, but can hopefully give people, a window into the fact that my mind isn't awful, And punching up and punching down is a different conversation. It's very interesting. Like you said, I think that punching up is a good way to use comedy for social change and all of that. And some people would say that it's not cool to punch down. I think punching down can be really funny. I every joke, I try not to make too many rules about comedy because you can make something funny. And I hate, and this happens in San Francisco, I'll lead into a joke and maybe it'll feel a certain way, and I've written it in a certain way where it comes back around and you're not gonna hate me at the end of the joke because that's not who I am. But when I set it up, people are off board already, and it's do you know what comedy is? Give me time to explain it. A lot of times comedy is setting up something that sounds awful and then defending it with logic until people are oh my God, I've never thought of it that way. It's kind of funny. And then maybe at the end, giving people something sweet that feels good at the end. That's, gotta give it some time.
That's a really good point, is that to let the artist do the work and see where it's guided and not be closed-minded. Openness is a really important trait. That's a great way to be able to process new ideas and change minds, etc. Okay, you started talking about political correctness, so now we have to dive into this a little bit. So there's this idea that if you're not building up your immune system to being able to take a joke, then even if it is punching down, if someone is trying to make complete fun of how hairy I am, because I'm a hairy chimp, basically. Very hairy.
It's insane.
And
you should take off your shirt.
You should do it just
now.
Show us.
Yeah.
Show us, yes.
Yeah, that should be your
super hairy.
Yeah, that should be your Patreon. You should start a Patreon and be if you donate $10 a month, I'll mail you a box of my belly hairs. Maybe it's worth a shot.
One person probably.
Well, you've got plenty of supply, so as many people want to get out there, he could support 100,000 requests.
See, so one has to be able to know how to accept the joking on themselves, and that this is part of being able to grow up and play with other humans, with other primates. Because if one becomes so coddled in a bubble that they can't take any of this, they won't build their immune system up, and they won't be able to play and engage with other humans. So do you kind of like that building up the immune system mentality for comedy?
I do. I mean, I think, it's funny with comedy because it's always been known as this thing where people can kind of shatter norms and say crazy stuff, and that is what it is, but it's ultimately a part of an industry which is political leanings are taking it very far away from a place where that is acceptable. So it's a fine line to walk, because on the one hand, like I said, people being so politically correct that they can't take a joke at all is difficult to comedy. I mean, Dave Chappelle in one of his latest specials was saying, like, comedians, like, it is your job to say some reckless shit, right? And I think that's true. And what I ask for is the space for us to say that reckless shit and try and defend it, and for people to not get offended out of hand without giving it any time. That said, there are some things where you can also say something and be wrong. And then if someone gets offended by it, because everyone's split into either I'm PC or PC is all BS, then the second one of those moments happens, people just run into their camps, and some people are like, oh, this PC culture is bullshit. And it's like, sometimes you can say something which is wrong, and you might have to get dragged for that as a comic or whatever, and that's kind of the life you chose as well. Like, you have to if it's a free marketplace of ideas, sometimes you have a bad one, and sometimes people are going to come after that. So it's always a case-by-case basis. I think that what people have lost a lot is the benefit of the doubt for anyone that they perceive as not being on their side.
We can even go through an example of if you were to potentially try and teach people about how horrendous it was of the enslavement of so many Africans around the world, and you can walk them through a process of what it was actually like to do something like that, and then at the very end be like, listen, that's one of the most fucked up things that's ever happened on this planet. Right? And so there's like a different way. Like, if you're going to explain what it's like to be someone that's completely poor today, that doesn't even have barely anything to eat, that has to still walk to a well for their water, and you walk them through that process, and you're cracking jokes about it the whole time. And then at the very end, you're saying, like, we got to fix that inequality, because that would suck to be in their shoes. So these are the types of things that
be a hilarious bit.
No.
I mean, I think that a scenario like that, what's interesting about that is, while you're talking about that, what I'm thinking is, a part of comedy is realizing, like, sometimes you only have 5 minutes in front of a room, and you need to realize how they're going to perceive you immediately, because whatever comes out of your mouth is filtered through whatever they've judged you as immediately. And I don't think that means you should never, like, talk about other experiences or talk about things that you're not, because half of comedy is talking about, like, different groups of people and how we all engage together as a culture. But as you're saying that, I don't think there would be anything wrong with doing that, and it really depends on how the bit is written. But as you're saying that, like, when I go to open my notebook, I usually think, like, a crowd probably, for better or for worse, and whether or not I want to do this work is up to me. A crowd probably doesn't want to hear me talk about slavery. It's like, it's not like I had anything to do with that, but it's not something that people are probably looking forward to hearing me talk about, because A, if I'm joking about it, it's going to be tense. And B, if I'm just preaching about it, people are like, yeah, that's a real original point that you think slavery is bad. Or are you just trying to like
take
look?
The newest sort of displacement of people, the Rohingyas. And so there's a massive, like over 1 million refugees that have now been moved from Myanmar, from the coast out to refugee camps in Bangladesh. So
very small in the normal news headlines, isn't it?
Exactly.
It doesn't crack the top 10 very much.
So now we're taking something that is being missed out of echo chamber news feeds, and we are applying it as there is comedy there, and there is a way to portray it to increase people's awareness about a painstaking situation that would get people to maybe feel more. Sometimes the best way to get people to get behind someone else's shoes is potentially an immersive VR experiment. It's potentially having them meditate on what it would be like to be them. But sometimes it's getting them to laugh and realize, I would fucking hate to be in that shoes, and so now I'm going to do something about that. So it's interesting to explore.
And there are a lot of comics that will absolutely do that, and whatever, you know, color of their skin, race, gender, all that kind of stuff. I do think you can talk about these things, and I have seen comics of all, you know, everything talk about things like slavery and horrible things and kind of do well. The decision that you make as a comic, if that's going to be part of your act, then you are like, okay, I'm doing the political act. That because it's hard to segue from something kind of like trivial or like, oh, I'm doing fun like every day, like dating's weird, you know, and then you're like, also, so is genocide. How about those Rohingyas? Like that's a very hard switch.
Which can be interesting in its own sense as an artist, to be able to switch like that. Because then you're really showing people that you can play in all different fields.
The best way to do that, if you're not going to be talking about that already, is to slide it in before people realize what's going on. Because what happens a lot of times, and everyone has their own style, but I do hate this, is when someone just like is like doing this and then just like pivot and then just preaches about something and then gets to an applause break and like, or what people call clapter, which is like literally just clapping and laughing just because they feel like they should, because you've made a powerful point and everyone in the room should agree with it. And it almost kind of feels like mind control sometimes. Because like the comedy of that situation is, you can feel that there is a right or a wrong, right? And the correct thing to do with comedy in a situation like the Rohingyas, for example, is to punch up, right? Because you should use this moment to tell people, to give people a walk in someone else's shoes, and to talk about something that's horrible in a scenario where they're not getting much of that information. But the funniest thing to do probably is to take the other side, which is horrible, but like that's what people would just like instinctively, even if they're like, oh God, like you know,
I want that coastal land, so I'm going to go and kill people for that coastal land and go and displace them.
That's the struggle, because like obviously now you're an asshole and like people don't like you, but the struggle for a comic is, do I want to say what I believe, which is like a good and positive thing, which is a helpful thought, which is constructive, which is calling attention to something important, and be kind of pandering? Or do I want to just be like, I'm gonna like, this makes me laugh because this is so clearly fucked up that like I'm just gonna do it, and then take that tack kind of with that little, you know, like sneer. And I think that a lot of comics that are really talented, they're able to talk about the horrible thing in a way that is genuinely funny, that isn't pandering. They don't allow themselves to get those pandering laughs. They dig in until they find a unique angle that still is punching up, but it doesn't feel so painfully obvious that everyone should be clapping at it. It's like this, wow, this is a hilarious bit, and it's based upon us all knowing who's right in this situation. That's what that is.
I love it, because you went and you showed us a binary view on it, which you have to either go super duper pandering to everybody, or the super aggressive, like completely counter, and then you found that nuanced position. I like how you did that live, because then that shows people that you can be really funny and still have an interesting moral arc and perspective to things. Let's touch a bit, because that was a lot on comedy. I think a lot of the time we don't even kind of understand that there's a ton of other opportunity that exists in the space, also in acting, also in different types of content creation, you know, running these podcasts, doing these little short, funny ass Chubby's videos. So tell us about all that other stuff.
Yeah, so that's, you know, one of the kind of goals that I had for the last 2 years of my life in San Francisco, you know, was to find a way to like actually keep doing comedy. And I'm out 5-6 nights a week generally, but find a way to have it become part of my day job, because back when we met, you know, I was doing something totally unrelated. There aren't as many like entertainment jobs in this town as you can imagine. So, but I've always loved podcasts. It's like listening to podcasts is part of what got me into comedy, believe it or not. It's probably one of the like first waves of that being the case. So
Silicon Valley has a lot of space for comedy. Like we have a tech culture has a lot of space for poking fun at it.
Yeah, I should pitch a show called Silicon Valley to HBO and see if they like it.
There's plenty more where that needs to be explored. Yeah,
there of course is. There absolutely is. But so like a big goal that I had was to launch my own podcast, and so a couple things I was able to do. We launched, me and 3 of my other favorite comics in San Francisco launched Pier 69, bought the equipment, do it out of my house.
And why'd you pick the name?
Because we're children. Well, the reason why actually is because the premise of that show is to say, like I said, I like to veer kind of like a little more positive, all these things. Our idea was like, let's see if we can make our like most completely uncensored, unsensitive bits, things that I would never say by myself or in polite company or probably shouldn't put on the internet. Let's just roll out the mics and just do that every week. And let's do it from a place that basically insensitive comedy in kind of a sensitive place is the premise of that show. And so Pier 69, Pier 39 is obviously a big San Francisco thing. 69 is a very stupid, immature joke. We're not above it.
It's a great sex position.
Yes, yeah, it's a mouthful. But we kind of wanted people to know going in, like if that type of joke offends you or is beneath you, like maybe don't. Like check it out. So that's been a lot of fun.
Just you started that up, you said just like the couple guys and with mics.
Yeah, literally like I ran to Guitar Center one day with like a backpack and like just like put stuff in and got like, came home and set that up. And then
I love that content creation. I like the stories about how people get started in the space. It's still a big land grab with the attention economy. And so if you can reel people in and teach them interesting things and build an audience that way, that's good. But like you pointed out earlier, sometimes it's not for everyone to pursue these types of things.
Right. And it is tough. I mean, it's tough to get people's attention. There are many award-winning podcasts that I don't know, what are their podcast awards? Who cares? There's a lot of like really good podcasts out there that I'll never hear because there's another new one pops up every day. So you get people who really like you, and cool thing is when people start to enjoy what you do, you're a part of their life. You're their commute, you're they're doing dishes, whatever. You're in their ear. It's this weird, like, intimate thing.
It is, and it's a new medium.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It feels pretty crowded at this point.
well, it's interesting because we never thought radio would become, podcasts would piggyback on what radio was. And now, because the supercomputers are in our pockets, and we have it everywhere we go, then that makes it so much easier to just tune into the voice being, I can record on my phone and post versus I need a radio station.
Right.
So now it's democratized.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing, and the thing with something being democratized is anyone can do it, right? So we just 4 idiots figured it out. We're doing that. On the flip side, I went to some conference and I saw one of the content creators, good friend Mason, speak, and he was from Chubby's, and I just saw the videos they made and how they were like, we are a company that obviously they were like kind of brought back shorts, and they're a men's apparel company. We obviously sell a lot more than that, but the way he pitched it to this conference I was at was he was just saying like, we consider ourselves also a media and entertainment company. And I was like, this doesn't exist in San Francisco. Like, how can I get my foot in the door? I went home right after this and just drafted an email, brought my comedy clip, grabbed the commencement speech, just, put everything, and one thing led to another, and now I'm there.
Let's go.
It's great.
That's how you do it. When you find something you love, you got to package it up like that and get after it. That's really great. And actually, that's a huge testament to the future of media in general, is if you have a clothing line, you better know how to be a funny, entertaining, mission-driven organization to stay relevant.
Yeah, and we have, so the Chubby's podcast we have is like, it's a business podcast, and we were able to get like top in the business charts last week, and we had this kind of exciting week, but it's not business. We don't talk about business at all. We literally, it's an hour of comedy, and the only time we address that we're going to do business, we're like, oh yeah, we'll get to that, and then we never do. So we kind of like faking, what we do. But
where do you guys manufacture your clothes? What's your customer acquisition cost?
Right, exactly. Like, we're going to cover the white papers at the end of the show, but first, I'm going to do monologue jokes, or we do physical challenges where people are chopping wood, and I'm announcing it like a sportscaster, and it's like, it's mayhem, right? But that is now what?
Yeah, that's our little timer for the 15-minute glass.
Oh, that's cool. That's classic. That's an old timer right there.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I'm in Aladdin. You got the hourglass.
The carpet's lifting up.
Oh my God, I'm gonna watch this. I feel like my life is slipping through my hands. But it's like, again, you're competing for people's entertainment, and like, I don't even consider that marketing. I consider that putting on a comedy variety hour show with some of my good friends and the fan base that they've already built, because we just make stuff that people like, and hopefully those people find that and they really like the clothes, or vice versa, and they kind of come into listening to us that way. There's so much content out there. We're hit with stuff all the time. If you can't be genuine, if people can't feel where you're coming from, if they don't like you're not gonna do well no matter what you're selling. You could be selling shorts. You could also be, what we're doing here. We're competing for someone's attention. They're shutting off their own thoughts for an hour, which might be nice for some of you, But
oh my God,
all of us. Sometimes you're like, I don't want that right now.
Or I want to learn about a specific topic.
Right.
And if I want to learn about what the future potentially of positive comedy or content creation is like, maybe I do want to tune in so I can find myself at the edge exploring as well. I want to ask you on the way out, I want to ask you a couple things. Mm-hmm. I find that we don't have the right funnels for youth to pick up comedy. And there seem to be a couple, maybe potentially, reasons why there's no like middle school and high school comedy showcases. I don't know. But teach us about this. What's up with these funnels? They're not really in place for we've seen sometimes 14-year-olds take the big stage and like actually do really well, poking fun at adult life and stuff like that, and high school life or whatever. So tell us about this, because I would find it really interesting to try and actualize more young people into this field. It seems to be one of the ones that's going to get automated much later.
Yeah, right. So there are obviously an example of a successful comedian who started young. I think the funnel now, honestly, for young kids is YouTube. Like, if you think about, at least, I don't know, I don't hang out with a ton of 8th graders, but like, whenever I hear kids that age talk, it is astounding how many of them are like, man, I want to be a YouTuber when I grow up. I'm like, when you grow up, there's a camera on your computers. Start doing it. But the first person to do that, or one of the first people to do that, was Bo Burnham. Yeah. And he was a young kid who started making kind of funny, funky songs in his room and recording them, and they blew up. And he blew up as the platform YouTube blew up. He was an early adopter, and he became this incredible sensation. And he actually just made a movie called 8th Grade, right? Yep. I think for that exact reason. I think he is the embodiment of like creating kind of that funnel or trying to do that. I think the reason that we don't see many of those funnels, one, I think that a lot of kids are doing YouTube, and I don't know if that's a really a good thing or not. If you want to do that, I remember running around making jackass videos with my friends on a camcorder, punching each other in the face and dragging each other behind cars and all that kind of stuff. So if a kid's interested in something, you got to let them do it. You just kind of hope they don't become famous and break their brains. But as far as like actually getting up on a stage and doing stand-up, I think most eighth graders are so mortally afraid of what people think of them that to get up and own a room is almost impossible. 2, what they think is funny is fucked up oftentimes. Like, it's just weird. The mind of an eighth grader, like, I have found some like old Facebook messages that I sent when I was in eighth.
Absolutely.
Insane.
Bad stuff, yeah. Some interesting things.
Yeah. And the third thing I think that would, again, if a kid starts doing comedy at a young age, they're going to be ahead of the game, and it could end up being a very good thing. But I think part of comedy a lot of times is having a slightly more adult perspective on things. And even I started when I was, I think, 21 or so, and even as of a few years ago, I talked to one of the bookers at a major club here before I had passed there, and he kind of said he was having some conversations with some people about where I was at, and was like, "Oh, it's funny. Like, he's got what it takes, but he's not talking about anything yet because he hasn't really experienced anything."
Sure.
It's a patronizing view to take of eighth graders. They're going through more intense like drama all the time, every day. But sometimes they don't have the developed kind of like brain and logic to be like, why don't I filter this in a way that'll work?
How many of those young people are being creatively squelched by the high noise to signal ratio? So they are struggling with creatively expressing themselves via these mediums now because there's too many posts on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and whatnot, which make it much more difficult for them to find a way to vocally or through writing or through auditory or video actualize themselves in that way. Okay, a couple quick powwows on the way out.
The answer is you're right, though. I mean, even when I'm like looking at my phone and then I think I try to create stuff, you just start wanting to like mimic people. So if you want to do something creative, sometimes you need to shut it down. And like, I'm addicted all the time. I check it all the time. It's more than I should. Yeah. But I put it away enough that I can get some space so that you're not mimicking when you're trying to think deeply.
Do that so you can actually go hyper-focus on your creativity. Yeah. Deleting apps is very powerful. Reclaiming your mind from the attention economy is very powerful. One has to set those conscious goals and follow up on them. Power round. What would you say is a core driving principle of your life?
I think this is like so cliche and obvious, but to me it is being happy, but also considering what long-term happiness means and knowing that that's not like a constant state. It's like an ideal to try and move towards, and realizing that sometimes happiness is going out to a bar and getting drunk with your friends, right? I love that. Sometimes happiness is going to the gym, focusing on fitness. Happiness can be doing things for other people, doing things that fulfill yourself, reading, watching things, whatever feeds you for like a deep feeling of, I don't even know if it's happiness, but I guess it kind of is. It's happiness and self-actualization and feeling like you're the best version of yourself, because I don't think that's a state that you necessarily have to achieve. I think it's a state that's kind of within you, and you need to figure out what things you need to do that can bring you to that place where you feel that.
That's good. What would you recommend as a principle for society to feel more of the collective, of the unity feeling that we so need? Yeah,
I think, and this isn't the exact answer, but I think that we mentioned it earlier in this. If you try to start your day or have a check-in with yourself at some point in the day and focus on having a feeling of gratitude for the things that you do have, not just the things that you're trying to get, it will put you in a position where you will feel better about yourself, and you will also feel better about other people. And instead of thinking, oh, I don't have this, I want to, you're already grateful for what you do have. That's going to make you see maybe someone else's perspective with and ease your light. It might make you see a comic start a joke that you think you're going to hate, and you are a little less, so you give them a little more time. If you can focus on being grateful for what you have, I think you cut other people a little more slack, and hopefully that would allow people to calm down a little bit. Got to focus on the love.
I love that. Gratitude can definitely inspire a lot of love and a lot of compassion and a lot of collective thinking. I like that a lot. All right, last two. Are we in a simulation?
Oh, I should have known. I should have known it was coming. I think that this is going to be like the least like brainy answer. I think that there's a lot of, if you read books about it, if you understand how advanced we're getting at creating alternate realities and how indistinguishable they may and will become from human life, and how that could have happened before, and how you can like look at like seeing like patterns of code and mathematics and the underlying symmetry of the universe, you could see all of that, and then still I'd be like, I don't think so. Because I just, some things, and I hate like gut feeling people, because people's guts tell them some wacky ass shit, and sometimes but maybe it just works for me. I feel like I can know this is real, and maybe even this is the most important thing. Even if it is a simulation, it's the only real thing I've ever known, and so everything that I've been told life is real to me, whether or not someone's like, doing it. And I hope, hey, maybe if there's someone up there playing the game and he's got Joey Avery and I'm his character, I hope that guy's, I hope you're good. I hope you're good at this game. I'm trying to win.
You're trying, like we said earlier, you're trying to level up to be the best your character can possibly be in this game, in this reality.
Right, but I gotta believe that I am a real being in a real space that has some power of self, and I feel it to be true. So I'm gonna fucking stick with it.
Your entire preface was like, this is super code. It's all code.
Right.
It's all indistinguishable realities.
Right, but if there is a higher intelligence in the universe, right? And if you can have an experience through intense meditation or psychedelics or all these things that reveal these truths to you, and you can feel it, and whether that's in your brain or whether it's something out there or whether it's a simulation and it's math and you can see all these things, the simulation and a God could be the same description.
Definitely. We talk about that a lot. People always tend to say, do you believe in God? It's like, well, why don't we come up with these interesting ways to define it? Could it be all that is? Could it be consciousness or divinity or infinity, or so many ways to describe it? Last question.
Yeah.
Last question. What's the most beautiful thing in the world?
No, I had to. What is the most beautiful thing in the world is love. And it is everywhere, and everyone has it, and when you give it to people, it works. I mean, and it expresses itself through many things. If you said that it was a particular painting, that was probably done with some sort of love or care. It can be love for a passion, love for yourself, love for someone else, anything. That is the blanket concept that is that answer immediately.
That was really well described, because it's right there in so many different ways. And
it's fleeting. I mean, it's hard. Sometimes you feel very far from it, and some people struggle with that more than others. Everyone struggles with it to some point, and so that's why it's important to find the things that you love. And like I said, for some people that is the hustle and the grind. Some people it's working a certain amount and then going traveling, whatever it is, spending time with their people. You got to find the things that you love. You got to fight for those things, and that's pretty much all you can do.
Joey Avery, what a freaking pleasure this has been, my man.
This was great. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Of course.
Super fun.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff there. We could potentially explore doing a Pier 69 video on set, because Mark and Andrew, Andrew's already on the lineup. We've been aiming to get him on. So let's, maybe we do that. That'd
be wild. That would be, things would be said.
Things will be said. This has been great. A lot to think about. Thanks, everyone. We greatly appreciate you all tuning in. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts. Check out Joey's website. Check out him on Instagram, Twitter. Check on Pier69 as well as the Chubby's podcast. Those links are below. Go check them out. Give them a listen. Also, everyone, keep supporting artists and entrepreneurs. People that are taking those risks, support them. Help people like Joey, like us, grow our endeavors. And we'll help you as well. This is how we do it, everyone. Much love. We greatly appreciate it. Shout out to Ron Vargas, the preferred technical director of the world. Of the world. We love you so much, everyone, and we will see you soon.
Peace.